Doesn't take up.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock. Randy.
What?
It's it is 6 o'clock. We're going to call the meeting the meeting of the Dover Municipal Water Task Force to order. Tonight is a public forum where we will have several presentations and discussions by Chris Gaskins from the Dufresne Group and Ashley Luck from Quantified Ventures. A lot of information, and I'm not going to take up too much time with organization because I want to give you ladies as much time as possible. Are there any public comments before we start? Jim? Yeah, we're going to have time for that. I hope we'll make time for it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. First order of business, we do have minutes from our January 7th meeting.
January 7th, 2026 meeting minutes as presented.
And I will second.
And Randy has second. Is there any opposition from the members of the task force? We do have a quorum, so okay. Those meetings stand approved, minutes stand approved unanimously. Okay, I am going to turn the mic or turn the meeting over to Chrissy and Ashley. I think because we have some new people, could I ask just each of the two of you to introduce yourselves to the room before we get going?
All set?
I'll go for it.
All right.
Go on.
So Chrissy Haskins with Dufresne Group. I'm a co-president at Dufresne Group and the project manager for this project.
And I'm Ashley Lux. I'm with Quantified Ventures, a consulting company that is being provided free of charge to the town of Dover, courtesy of the New England Water Infrastructure Network, which I'll speak a little bit about who they are in my section.
Okay.
Hey, do you want me to grab names of a piece of paper, get names?
Yes, would you? That would be great because Alan's not here. Okay, we are going to circulate before we get into that. We are going to circulate. Rich is going to circulate a pad. We could just ask everyone who's here to please sign so we could record who's here.
You can just take it. You can just take a picture of it and send it to me.
Okay, we'll do. Hey, Jim, I know you're taking pictures of the slides, but we will make those available on the website like we did last time. So it's up to you. You can do it, but it might be easier if you just take them from the website. Correct?
Yes.
We'll
yeah,
put your
yes.
slides on the website. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So this is our third and final public meeting of this water feasibility study. The first meeting we had, I think in the summer, we talked about the survey. We talked about some of the existing conditions in terms of water quality, water quantity. Our second meeting we had just about a month ago. And we talked about some of the alternatives and some of the needs for improved water supply. And so tonight, I'm not going to recap any of that. We talked about a lot of information last time. Tonight, we're going to focus more on the numbers. So while I just said I'm not going to recap, I do want to just remind you of what the priority areas were that we talked about last time. And I will note, if you missed the last meeting, I strongly encourage you to go watch the video of it, because there is a lot of information in there that is important in all of this. So the priority areas we talked about last time, we had two in West Dover. One was the base area centered around Mount Snow and the residential developments surrounding Mount Snow. And then the commercial area, which was the Route 100 corridor from Tannery down to the town office. There was one in East Dover, one priority area, which centered around the school to the town hall where we are tonight. We're not really going to talk about East Dover tonight. We're going to really focus on West Dover. So these are just some of the stats from what we talked about last time. For anybody who's paying really close attention, the pipe lengths and well numbers and connection numbers changed a little bit, but the price ranges did not. The cost estimate ranges did not. We also have a map to remind everybody of where those areas were. So the purple in the kind of the upper left there is the base area. The green The little narrow strip of green is the commercial area, and then the red over on the right is the Eastover area. You'll also see that I have a red circle up there with a big arrow pointing to it. After the last presentation, I had some discussions with some of the committee members, and we talked about potentially providing a couple more priority area options just for consideration, for comparison purposes. So that circle is what I'm calling the plus in the base plus alternative or priority area. So it would be the purple area plus that area along Handle Road, south of Tannery within that circle. The reason for that is that the preferred tank location is up on the top of Bears Crossing. So if we're going to connect a tank on the top of Bears Crossing all the way down to a distribution system that serves the base area or the commercial corridor, there's going to be a pipe there. And so if we have a pipe there, the one of the options we were talking about in terms of how do we install the pipes is that the water system would install main lines, and then each customer would be responsible for their connection to it. So in that scenario, it wouldn't cost the project all that much more to add users along that pipe since it's already there anyway. And what that does is it increases the number of people using the system and thereby sharing the cost. There is a slight cost increase with this because of adding more wells to support the additional users, but it's not a huge cost increase. So that's one new priority area that we're going to talk about. So that one's called Base Plus. So it's the purple and the red circle. And then the other one is between the purple area and the green area, so the base area and the commercial area, there is overlap in some of that infrastructure. So they share the same tank, they share some of the same wells, they share some of the same pipes. And so if you were to construct base area and commercial area, so let's say 35 million and 25 million, 35 plus 25 is 60 million, but constructing those two areas together is not 60 million because there's an overlap in costs. So I also created a priority area that combines the two of those to show, kind of represent what that cost overlap is in those two priority areas. Right. So this is the same table as previous, but it has those two new areas. So the middle column there is the base plus. And then the other one, I took the base plus and the commercial, base plus and commercial. So the base area, we had a cost estimate range of 30 to 35 million. So you can see here it's 32 to 38 million, slight increase to account for the extra sources and the connection of those sources. And then the base plus and the commercial combined, like I said, if you added those two numbers together, 60 million, here you can see 43 to 48 million. So that represents the overlap of approximately $15 million, let's say. I also wanted to point out on here, the second column from the bottom, or sorry, the second row from the bottom says ERUs. Now, I'm guessing that most people do not know what that means. So that stands for an equivalent residential unit. When we're going to present some potential user fee scenarios. And when we compare those, it's easiest to compare them with what's called an ERU. That represents a single family home. Now, that might not represent exactly what you use for water in your single family home, but it's just a standard planning number that we use when we're developing projects at this early on in the planning process as a easy way to compare user fees between various scenarios or various alternatives. So you'll see that again later, and I just wanted to explain what that meant. So the other thing that I wanted to explain, because we're going to be talking a lot about cost, and it all starts with that total project cost. So what is a total project cost? This is a simplified example of one of our cost estimates. Basically, there's a lot more detail that goes under the construction section. I simplified it for the slide so we could actually read it. So on the top section there, we have construction costs. So that's the cost of drilling wells, installing pump houses, installing treatment, storage tanks, transmission and distribution systems, so the pipes. Those are the construction costs. The next line down there, subtotal construction cost. Then we add a contingency because we're very early in the planning process. We've talked about this in the previous meeting, that there's a lot of unknowns out there in this planning process right now. So in order to attempt to account for those unknowns, we added a 40% contingency on the construction cost. That gives us our total construction cost estimate. From there, we also have to add in engineering costs. So we have preliminary engineering, also known as step 1 engineering. That includes things like groundwater availability studies, site evaluations for wells and tanks, a preliminary engineering report, which becomes the basis planning document that the whole project then gets built off of. So that's all covered under preliminary engineering. Then you have final design engineering. And if you're following along, that would be step 2 engineering. That's where we prepare the drawings and specifications for the project. That's what those are the documents the contractor is going to use to construct the project. And then we have construction engineering, step 3. This is the engineer provides contract administration during construction and resident engineering to document all of the construction, prepare as-built drawings after construction. Basically, the engineer acts as the liaison between the town and the contractor and make sure everything is built as designed and permitted. We have land acquisition. On the engineerings, I want to know those are all estimated based on what's known as the fee allowance formula. It's a formula that's issued, it's actually a guidance document issued by the state that has a formula in it that estimates a reasonable fee based on construction cost for the different steps of engineering. And at this phase of planning, it's fairly typical to use that formula to estimate the engineering fees moving forward. In each step of engineering, there would be actual detailed level of efforts done to develop scope and budget. But for planning purposes, we just use that formula. On the land acquisition, the town would need to acquire land very likely for sources and for water storage and potentially some of the pipe routes to connect those sources and water storage. This is a placeholder. At this point, we don't know what land needs to be acquired or how much land needs to be acquired. So this is a placeholder for now. It could go up or down depending on what is needed as the preliminary engineering develops. And then there's legal, fiscal, administrative costs. These are some of the miscellaneous costs that go along with the project. Legal for purchase and sale agreements, easements, bond votes, ordinance review, things like that. Administrative costs can be assistance from RPC, the Regional Planning Commission, permit fees, things like that. And then fiscal can be if the carrying loan is needed to make payments prior to reimbursements being received. That could cover interest on the carrying loan. So it's important to understand what all goes into the total project cost, because these things are all not going to happen at the same time. So if the town decides to move forward, the preliminary engineering is going to start right away, but you're not going to have a water system right away. So you're not going to have water system customers to charge right away. So now everybody's probably wondering where you're going to get the money to pay for that. So there is a planning loan program through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund that Ashley's going to talk about. And that offers 0% interest loans for planning for step 1 and step 2 planning tasks. And those loans, as long as the project keeps progressing, those loans basically get held by the state until we get to construction, and then they get wrapped into the construction loan. So ultimately, as long as the project continues to progress through the stages of project development, all of the money that is all of the loans that are covering preliminary engineering, final design engineering, and even into construction, all of that is held by the state until after construction is completed. And at that point, the water system is in service, it's in use, you have customers, and you're collecting user fees. So the purpose of all of that description there is that the actual payment for all of this wouldn't start for at least 10 years, if not longer, 10 to 15 years. Until then, the state basically holds a loan for you, for the town. So with that, I'm going to let Ashley talk a bit about the funding and how we can pay for these projects. So just give me a moment to switch over. We're going to do that. And
There you are. You're not there. You're not there. I saw you showed up. No, it's okay.
there we go.
There we go.
All right.
So here's the description of the evening. So as I said, I am Ashley with Quantified Ventures. That way. Ah. Right. And so just again, a little bit of background about how I come to you. I work for a private consulting company, just like Chrissy does, but we are paired with the New England Environmental Finance Center, which is out of Maine, and they received funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law to support public utilities, water, wastewater, stormwater utilities in accessing the state revolving funds. The New England Environmental Finance Center does a lot of work throughout New England with small communities. And when they procured Quantified Ventures, they wanted us for our experience really in the SRF world, because many of the people who I work with at QV came from Vermont's SRF programs. We know really small water systems. We know them intimately, and we understand kind of the soup to nuts challenges and opportunities that affect you all. And I guess I should say why you should trust me. I spent 15 years with the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund with the state of Vermont before joining the Vermont Bond Bank. And so I know kind of a bit about how funding works in the state of Vermont, what you have to do from both a borrower's perspective and from, frankly, what the lender is looking for in terms of prepping your case or applying to the program. I also understand the regulatory frameworks around public water systems. I actually spent my first couple of years with the state of Vermont inspecting transient non-community water systems in Dover. And I'd come down here and I'd be like, I'm going to be at you at 10, the next place at 11, the next place at 12, the next place at 1, and I would just hit all of the wells along Route 100. So that's where I cut my teeth down here. It's like there are a lot of public water systems down. It's a good thing you have a municipal wastewater system. So kind of getting into the funding and financing options. For me, I am particular to the SRF programs, the state revolving fund programs, because again, that's where I spent my career. But I also think that they are the best sort of source of funding for, again, the really small systems in Vermont, because of how flexible they are. So just to give you some sort of 30,000-foot view of Vermont's DWSRF program, is it offers 30-year loans at 2% interest. And that is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's a 30-year, 2%, everybody's eligible for it. Certain communities may be eligible for longer terms, lower interest rate, and potentially additional subsidy. But those situations are very unique and nuanced. And so I'm not going to go into any of those details today. And the scenarios that Chrissy has run are all based on a 30-year 2% loan, because that is what everybody gets. That's what you're guaranteed. It's been like this for 10 years. And I will say that again, this is a very dependable program. And some may say, well, isn't it a federal program? Don't you get federal money? And isn't there issues with federal government, right? With additional funds? And you're not wrong. But that is the beauty of the revolving nature of the SRF program, is there are almost 30 years of loans that have gone out that are in continual repayment. And so the amount of money that's coming in repayment funds is in the tens of millions of dollars a year, whereas the money coming in from the federal government is in the single $1 million per year. And so you can see that this Scrooge McDuck pile of money is going to keep growing and growing the longer loans keep getting repaid. So that's why I'm really partial to the SRF. So some of the strengths of the SRF program, Chrissy did mention the delayed repayment. That is not a joke. As long as we're not going to be like carrot, and then I say we, like I'm still in the program, right? I'm not in the program anymore. But as long as the project is moving forward, there's no repayment expected. And even while you're under construction, you're not expected to repay on it. Repayment starts a year after construction is completed. Now, I want to be clear and say, not until the entire system is built out and you have all of your wells pumping and you have everybody served. It's the phases of the project. As you can imagine, there may be, I don't want to speak for the engineering side, but there may be 10 phases to the project, right? As you build out these distribution mains. Each phase of that project will have its own loan and repayment term and start date, etc. Other strengths to the SRF is 100% financing. There's no match required. You don't have to go and find grant funds. You don't have to do in-kind work. It is 100% financing. And kind of with that is, if you apply for a loan for $10 million, but you only seek reimbursements of $9 million, you're only going to have to pay back $9 million. So even though you raised your hand and said, I think I'm going to need 10, it's not like we deposit $10 million. Again, it's not like the state deposits $10 million into Dover's bank account and says, go have fun with it, just pay us back. That's not how it works. There are broad eligibilities, and when I say that, it really is kind of anything related to protecting public health is eligible for the SRF loan, the DWSRF loan specifically. No prepayment penalty. So if while you're in planning or even design or frankly even construction, and there is a benevolent Dover resident who provides a largesse to the community that says, take $1 million and spend it on the water system. You can pay off some of your loan in advance of its maturity. Okay, so that would essentially reduce the amount of principal that you're paying over time. It might also mean that you actually don't need to take that much out. We had talked about pre-construction funding. This planning and design phases, the step 1 and step 2. Vermont is unique. There are only a handful of programs across the country that offer pre-construction funding, but it really helps out the small systems because, as you saw in Chrissy's slide, the step 1 and step 2, the preliminary and final design expenses are in the millions of dollars. And a small community like Dover does not have that sitting around in its couch cushions. So having the ability to access this pre-construction funding at essentially no cost to you is an incredible benefit. I mentioned below market interest rates. The interest rate for the SRF is fixed at 2%. You're not going to get that anywhere else. Not in today's market, not in the market of 4 years ago. See here, it's reliable, predictable sources of funding, and I say no borrowing limit with an asterisk. There may be limits to your borrowing capacity, but really that would be dependent on what your financial picture looks like, and maybe to some extent what the program, what the DWSRF has at its ready. If you were looking to come in for all 60 or 25 or $30 million at once, the SRF may be like, hang on. 1, I don't believe you can spend that in 2 years. And 2, that's actually going to put a strain on us. But the fact that this project is going to be implemented over many years means that for all intents and purposes, there's no borrowing limit. So it can't all be great, right? Like, there are some opportunities for improvement or challenges associated with the SRF, and I would be the first to admit that. It is a federal funding program. So as you can imagine, with a federal funding program comes a lot of red tape, comes a lot of what we call federal cross-cutters. And those are things like environmental review and American Iron and Steel and Build America, Buy America, and just a laundry list of federal requirements that make the project, frankly, more expensive, more time consuming. But again, it's federal money, highly subsidized federal money, so you take the good with the bad. I will say that the loan application process for some communities feels very long and feels very drawn out. Again, this is a federal loan program that is highly subsidized. And so I would say, think about what you have to do in order to get a mortgage and put that on steroids. This is a really big mortgage. And so the amount of due diligence that needs to happen is commensurate with the benefits that you are getting. When I say funding is slow, when I say that, it's for communities who might have an emergency or have experienced a loss of water, the SRF is not the source for that, right? It's perfect for a community like this, where you are being very deliberate and very purposeful in how you're implementing the project, again, over many, many years. So SRF is actually perfect for that. I'm sure Chrissy can attest to the significant oversight that occurs with the SRF program. There are a lot of checks and balances at the state level for permitting, and again, making sure that these projects and the process complies with the federal cross-cutters. And this is something I identify, the last bullet is something I identify when I do training in other states and to other state SRF programs, is the fact that because specifically the DWSRF has been around since roughly 1997, you can imagine that many of the people who were in the program when it was first established are starting to retire. And so this is not the type of program you learn overnight. I mean, again, I've been in it for almost 20 years and I'm still learning new stuff. So having those people retire does create vacuums in the programs that can, frankly, slow things down. So there are a couple of other funding sources that are very prevalent in Vermont. One is the Vermont Bond Bank, and the other is USDA Rural Development. So first, I want to touch on the Vermont Bond Bank. So that is, and I'm going to use words that you're probably going to be like, I don't know what those mean, but I'm still going to say them. They are what's called a conduit financer. So in Vermont, there's only one or two independently rated entities, meaning they went to Moody's or Fitch or S&P and said, give me a rating so I can go to the capital markets to so I can get an influx of funds. Because Vermont doesn't have that, it still needs a way, doesn't have a lot of communities that have that. It still needs a way for communities to access capital to do infrastructure projects. And so the Vermont Bond Bank was created in 1969 to do that. The Vermont Bond Bank says, hear ye, twice a year, do you have an infrastructure project that you need capital financing for? And twice a year, communities across the state, school districts, consolidated water districts, towns, villages will apply to the bond bank for their pooled loan program. The bond bank will take all those applications and apply to the capital market on their behalf. So that is a significant benefit to those who are looking to borrow, because again, I'm going to say another phrase that you're going to be like, I don't know what that means. The cost of issuance is borne by the bond bank. And that cost of issuance can run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars each time you access capital funds. So the bond bank is a really great resource for any type of what we call political jurisdiction throughout the state. And then rural development is another funding source, again, federal funding source, similar to the SRF. It has a lot less money available to it on a state-by-state basis, but applicants can apply to USDA, and if the state runs out of money, it goes to the quote national pool. And so that is another source of funding. I know a little bit about it just because when we've worked on projects, it's like, okay, is DWSRF better or is USDA better? And sometimes USDA is the better deal and sometimes the SRF is the better deal. There are, of course, strengths and challenges associated with each one. I would say on the bond bank side, again, 100% financing, no match, broad eligibilities. But to highlight bond bank, because it is not a federal funding program, there are no federal cross-cutters associated with it. So all of that red tape, except for maybe some environmental stuff, is eliminated when you go to the bond bank. There's no application fee. There's a short timeline to access funds. So you pass a bond vote, you apply to the bond bank, and 6 months later you can access your funds. So it is relatively quick. And I have this last bullet here that says opportunity for refunding. That essentially is an opportunity that your loan may get refinanced at some point in the future. So the interest rate that you get at the onset may not be the interest rate that you're stuck with in perpetuity. Again, these are very nuanced concepts that I could talk about for hours.
Trust me.
10.5. USDA, similar to the SRF, there are extended loan terms, 100% funding. There's no match, broad eligibilities. Their interest rates, there are 3 tiers of interest rates, and they're updated quarterly, and they're tied to the affordability of the community. And so you could be at the low rate, you could be at the medium rate, or you could be at the high rate. And that is determined by the application. It's not like, ooh, I'd really like the low rate. Can I get that? So but that's updated quarterly, and again, it's based on the demographics, it's based on project cost, a lot of variables. No application fee, and I say on the asterisk for grant availability is again, each state is allotted a certain amount of grant funding, and as you can imagine, it's highly competitive. You may have somebody from USDA come here and be like, you can get up to 75% grant, and like, don't believe them. They're a snake oil salesman. Like, that's not true. I think I've seen that in a couple of occasions, but it's like the poorest of the poor, the public health situation is like dismal. Grant availability, I would not count on it, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that it exists. So again, it can't all be great. So under the Vermont Bond Bank, the challenges are that, again, because you're going out to the capital markets and you and I can purchase that bond. Well, we want to get paid. Like I want to get the interest that I'm due. So the payments on the bond are due shortly after closing, 6 months. Now, there is an opportunity to delay principal for, I think it's up to 5 years, but you're still paying interest in the interceding times. And back to what Chrissy said, if you take out a bond but you don't have any paying customers, how are you going to pay that back, right? So bond financing it's great, but it's a tool in the toolbox. Interest rates are tied to market. You have zero control over it. The only benefit is that the Vermont Bond Bank is highly rated, and so you're going to get one of the best interest rates possible out on market, but it's still at the whim of market. There is no opportunity for what we call additional subsidy or grants. It's a loan, straight up loan. And you have to pay back what you borrow. So in the scenario where I said a little earlier that you took out $10 million, but you only spent $9 million on the project, and under the SRF and frankly USDA, you'd only pay back $9 million. Well, under the bond bank, you take out 10 million, you get 10 million. You have to pay back 10 million. So find another use for that $1 million. I'm sure you all could find another use for that. And you cannot prepay. It is, again, because bondholders are relying on the interest that you are paying on that capital. There's you can't prepay. And then the challenges for USDA rural development, similar to what they are for SRF. It's a federal funding program, a lot of cross-cutters, a lot of red tape. But different from the SRF is in USDA, the community, so Dover would have to incur all of the loan eligible costs prior to closing on the loan. Oh. And so if you follow that, that means that Dover would have to take out some sort of short-term interest line of credit, some essentially maybe even bond anticipation note or something like that to incur all of the loan eligible costs, and then you're paying interest on it, right? Prior to closing on the loan with USDA, and then you have the loan and you have to start paying back the loan. And if you get a grant, the project may not be complete because you incur all the loan costs first before you start spending on the grant eligible portions. So again, it could be a scenario where you're already paying back your financing while you're still, it's like you're sailing the boat while you're still building it, I guess would be a good scenario, corollary. And of course, uncertainty with the federal funding environment. And because this is not, USDA is not a revolving loan fund, there's not that like Scrooge McDuck pile of money that the program is sitting on that it can dip into in the event that there's no federal money. It is only federal money. So this I wanted to kind of put in perspective what Chrissy has been talking about with respect to the step 1, step 2, and step 3. And so really what I'm going to be speaking in SRF language here. Because again, that's my favorite funding program. I think it's probably the best source, at least in the beginning, for Dover to use. Right now you are in feasibility. So you are in like step 1A. And that's been going on for what?
About a year.
A year.
Yeah.
Okay. And there still may be some work to happen if you continue, if you say yes, there's still more feasibility to work out, right? So you're going to be in this feasibility, in this step 1A for like a year plus more. And then you go into step 1B, or real step 1, which is when you get into source exploration, you get into source permitting, you get into like evaluating different scenarios of, should the pipe go this way, should the pipe go that way? Do we have to consider environmental risks? Is there archaeology we need to be considerate of? Are there resiliency issues? That happens in the grown-up step 1, and that's why that timeline is significant. Because there are so many variables that Chrissy is going to have to consider. Once you've reached the end of, and I will also mention, this is getting back to the significant oversight, is the state is going to want to review that PER. And you can well imagine that that's not going to happen over like a weekend, right? That's a many month review with iterations back and forth. So that frankly might be a year of back and forth. I'm sure Chrissy would be like, or depending. Final design, that's step 2. That's when the proverbial pen goes to paper. That's when you're securing easements, when you're maybe doing some test pits on the archaeology, because they're thought it might be here, but now we have to actually make sure. That's when the bond vote happens. I know people's ears are perking up on the bond vote. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. But final design can take a couple of years also, especially for a project of this magnitude. And then you finally get to put a shovel in the ground, right? Like you have that golden shovel and the scissor cutting ceremony. Each phase of the project at step 3 has about 2 years to implement. If it goes beyond that, then the SRF program considers that a different project and a different loan, because of the federal rules, because you have to kind of get your project done within 2+ construction cycles. Okay, so again, adding all of this together, this is where Chrissy was like 10 years, right? We're maybe year 1, and so we've got another 9-10 years before that first phase is completed. And you're like, I'm not even going to be living here in 10 years, right?
Let's be optimistic here.
Yeah, so some of you may not see that golden shovel going in the ground. But this process happens for all projects. Like, it's not just Dover. Like, this happens in every infrastructure project that you see throughout the state. So I know one of the questions that a lot of people have is like, where's my free money? And first of all, free money is a 4-letter word in my world. I never talk about free money because there's no such thing as it. But when people say free money, in my opinion, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about reduced interest rates, because you are saving money by having the SRF program be a subsidized interest rate off of market. There is a gap there that you're saving. So that is free money. The next pot of free money that people often talk about are grants, or in SRF speak, it's called additional subsidy or principal forgiveness. So it's money you don't have to pay back, right? So those are the typical pots of free money that communities look to. And I would encourage the Dover public to not rely on the quote unquote free money for all the reasons. So why isn't it free? It isn't free because it takes time to apply for grant funds, to sort of wait until there's enough additional subsidy available to move the needle on the project. And those time delays result in more expensive projects just because of inflation. We've seen it. Those time delays could also mean, and I'm not saying specifically in this situation, but it could mean that a project doesn't get constructed and there is a failure of the existing infrastructure, which causes a public health issue or an environmental issue. I think in this situation, maybe we'd be talking about people who are drinking water that's contaminated with PFAS longer than if you went with just regular loans, right? Instead of waiting for grants. It takes time and effort to apply for those grants. Who's going to do it, and who are you going to pay to do it? That's a cost. Certainly uncertainty with delays. They're highly competitive, and frankly, we've seen. I know in our world as a consultant, we had contracts with organizations that were getting money from the federal government under the Inflation Reduction Act for solar work, that when the Trump administration came on, they canceled all of those grants. And so that's a lot of time that just went away, and now these projects aren't going to get done. And so relying on grants to meet the bottom line is it clouds the full cost of the project, and frankly, it's not a real transparent way to move forward. And my favorite reason for saying that it's not free is like, it's got to come from somewhere, right? Like, so in the situation of USDA or SRF, that's money that came from tax dollars. And so you and I are all paying for that subsidy, that additional subsidy. So it's not necessarily free. Moving on to what I call authorization to incur debt. And so for municipalities, really what we're talking about here is a bond vote. So any funding source that you look at, whether it be SRF, bond bank, or USDA, will require a bond vote. Now, there are two types of bond votes that exist generally and specifically in Vermont. There's one that's called the general obligation, or the GO, and the other is called a revenue bond. The GO is what 99.9999999% of communities in Vermont vote for any infrastructure project, whether it be a fire truck or a water line. They are passing a general obligation bond vote. And it is a vote of the voters of that political jurisdiction, whether it be North Branch Fire District. So North Branch Fire District has its own boundaries. And if you are in that fire district, you vote on that general obligation. If you are in the town of Dover, you are going to vote on a general obligation for a fire truck or potentially for a new public water system. That does not necessarily mean that everybody is going to pay that GO back. And in situations where it is a water and or wastewater or stormwater utility, I will tell you, as somebody who has done financial underwriting through the bond bank, is that when a GO or a application comes in for a water line project, we are not looking at the town writ large. We are looking at the enterprise fund, AKA the water system, okay? So we are making the assumption, the rightful assumption, that GO, that bond obligation is going to be borne and carried by the users of the utility, okay? So you're like, well, then why does everybody have to vote on it? Well, because that's the nature of a GO. A general obligation is the full faith and credit of the community is pledging that debt instrument. And so in the event of default, it is the full faith and credit of the town that is on the hook. I will tell you that there's not been a situation. There's been one situation over my career that I know of where the political jurisdiction was on the hook for a default, and not not the utility, right? Okay, so the utility is often a subset of the political jurisdiction. This geo is also just really easy for financial underwriters to work with. It is preferred by underwriting agencies. And I guess I should note that under the SRF, the bond bank is actually doing the financial underwriting. So even though the loan is through the SRF program, the bond bank is actually going to be the fiduciary. So I got to do both SRF and pooled loan. When we're talking about a revenue bond, so in Vermont, a revenue bond is actually still voted on by the voters. But it is pledging the revenues of said utility to pay the debt. Now, the challenge with a revenue bond is it comes with a lot more what are called covenants or restrictions on the use of funds. And what that turns into is a more expensive loan. So when I've seen revenue bonds, there is a covenant that usually says, thou shalt, meaning the utility, thou shalt charge 1 plus your operation and maintenance budget. So if your operation and maintenance budget, including debt, including paying the operator, et cetera, is $1 million, the covenant in the debt in that revenue bond says you actually need to collect 25% more, because we are concerned that you're not going to be able to pay your bills because of your credit worthiness, because of your demographics, because of all sorts of reasons. So the utility needs to charge 125% of what their operating budget is to satisfy the covenants in the revenue bond. That's not something that exists in the general obligation. Okay. There's also a lot of other nuances in the revenue bond. As somebody who has looked at them and has had to manage the financial underwriting and then the management of it, please don't do it. Please don't do it. It's a headache for administrative on the town side, and it's a headache for the financial underwriter, and it's going to cost you more. So again, I wanted to come back to, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but I just really think it's important for you all to understand that, again, these planning and design loans are really this very generous long-term line of credit where you're not incurring any costs. The state, yes, sits on that loan, and it's because the state sees the benefit of providing this safety net to the communities. We see better, the state sees better designed projects. There's an early relationship built, there's trust built with the program and with the community. And frankly, it's just a good deal for y'all. And these planning and design loans will give you the foundation to then go shopping to all the other funding sources, because it will give you the money to, it will provide you with the funding to create a planning document, which again, all of the funding sources that I mentioned, plus any grants that you choose to apply to, are going to want to see. They're going to want to see the preliminary engineering. They're going to want to see a bond vote. They're going to want to see the environmental. This gives you the funding to put those planning documents together to go shopping. And again, you don't have to pay anything until way in the future. And then construction loans, we like to say your planning and design loans grow up to be a construction loan. So everything is rolled up. It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling until a year after construction is complete, and then it's like, thank you, can I have my money, please? So how much will this cost me?
Just give us a second here. We're gonna switch back. Whoops. Slideshow from current. Sharing. Okay. So the potential cost scenarios. So we have here the various priority areas that we talked about earlier, the base area, the base plus area, the commercial corridor, and then the base plus and commercial corridor. So the top row in there is the estimated total project cost. Now, previously we'd given a range, so I went through and kind of picked a number for each one for the purposes of this evaluation. And for the base area, if you remember, that was 30 to 35 million. The base plus was 32 to 38 million. I picked 35 million for both of those for a reason. And we'll get there. But so I have both of those at 35 million. The Route 100 corridor 25 million, and the everything combined 45 million. The annual capital payment is the next row down. That is based on the 2% interest for 30 years. So that annual payment, 1.5 million for the first two, 1.1, and then 2 million. Annual operation and maintenance costs. So once the system goes into operation, there's costs incurred to operate that system. We need a licensed operator. There's potentially chemical feed that needs to be done. There's electricity costs. So all of these costs, we've estimated them. And you can see they're a little bit different for each of the scenarios, and that's based on different scenarios having different numbers of wells or significantly different lengths of pipe. There's different permitting fees. So there's annual fees that are due to the state based on water usage. So that's all factored into those operation and maintenance estimates. And then we just put a very modest reserve fund contribution. With a new system, you're hopefully not looking at a whole lot of maintenance, capital expenses right off the bat. But you do want to start accruing your reserve fund right away. And so we just put in a 10,000 a year for that for now. So that gets us adding those things together, the annual capital payment, the operation and maintenance costs, and the reserve fund contribution. That gets us our annual expenses. So that's the amount of money that the system would need to bring in to pay its expenses. The next line down is that ERU number we were talking about again. So this is the total potential ERUs in that priority area. So we went through and estimated the use of each property, single family home or some type of commercial use, and we calculated out the ERUs for each of those priority areas. And then we're not assuming that every single property is going to connect. So we have some different subscription rates down below that. The top one there is a 90% subscription. Next we have 70%, and then the bottom one is 50%. So what that means is 90% of those total ERUs would connect, or 70% of them, or 50% of them. So obviously, as our subscription goes down, we have less people paying for the system, and therefore the cost per user is going to go up. Again, as a reminder, ERUs are modeling a single family home. So you can see in those first two scenarios, the base versus the base plus, they have pretty similar total annual expenses. I think it's $10,000 different. The base plus is $10,000 more in annual expenses in these estimates. But the ERUs are about 270 higher. So we have more connections. And you can see what that does to the potential annual fee there for this ERU, this assumed single family home. As we move over to the West Dover, the commercial corridor, that is the lowest cost priority area on this chart. But when you look at the cost per ERU, because there's so few ERUs on that one, the cost is significantly higher. And then when we go to the far right there, that's the everything. That's all the priority areas combined. And you'll see that the cost per ERU is not that much higher than it is for, let's say, the base plus area. It's fairly similar to the base plus area, and it's actually lower than the other two. And that's because of the number of potential connections there, and the number of potential users. So that's how there's a lot of variables that go into what a potential user fee can look like. And this is actually fairly simplified because there's also considerations as to what does your rate structure look like. You can have fixed rate structures. You can have metered rate structures. You can have other types of fees that bring in revenue that might reduce this annual expense that needs to be paid by the user rate. So there's a lot of variables that go into it. This is a fairly simplified model for comparison purposes. But it gives everybody an idea of what that 35 million or 45 million breaks down to for a user. I believe that was a question last time is what does this cost a user? 35 million divided by the number of users. So this gives you an idea of what that could look like. Now, we also talked about in the last meeting, and we talked about a little bit today, that these numbers are all based on the mainline only construction scenario. So this would be the town or the water system is constructing the main lines, and the users have to install their services to the main line. This is the model I mentioned previously in the last meeting, that this is the model Killington's using right now as they construct their new water system. So in that respect, what would it cost to connect to the line? So everybody's going to be different. Every single property has different circumstances. How far away the building is from the main line. Is the main line on your side of the road, or is it on the other side of the road? Do you live on a paved road? What kind of building do you have? A single family home could have a 3/4 inch copper or maybe a 1-inch polyethylene service line. A commercial building with a sprinkler service, that's going to need to be bigger based on the sprinkler design. So that might have to be a 4-inch or a 6-inch pipe. And if you're a condo development, some sort of housing development, you already have a water system potentially. So I used 2 examples here. I'm not trying not to call out anybody here, but I just used 2 examples that are a little bit different, just to give some different scenarios here. So Outlook is bordered by both the North Access Road and Handle Road. So in the base area scenario, there would be water mains on those 2 roads. So Outlook would have the ability to connect in 3 different spots because of how their water system is set up. They have a 6-inch, all the pipes in their water system are 6 inches. So using ductile iron pipe, a cost for Outlook to connect could be $45,000 for one single connection, or if they connected all 3, it would be $130,000. It doesn't matter. It would still feed the whole system anyway. It's just connecting all 3 allows for looping, and we really like loops in water systems. So it provides better redundancy. If you have a break, you can shut a valve, and you're maybe not shutting off as many people. And it also provides better water quality. continuing on the housing development, Boulder Ridge has one access point, would be off of Route 100. That's it. And that would have to extend a bit further. Their water system is a bit further away from Route 100 than, let's say, Outlook is from Handle Road or the North Access Road. So that's going to be a longer pipe, but they have a 4-inch water system, so it's a smaller diameter pipe, but it is longer to connect to them. Going back to the single family home, you got let's say a 3/4-inch copper service, potentially $13,000 if it's about 100 feet long. And that includes valving for the service and bringing it into the building. And then there's an adder there if you're on a paved road. Commercial building, again, a little bit more than the single family home because it might need a larger pipe. So every scenario is going to be different. And these are also construction costs. Every property that connects will need to do a wastewater and potable water supply permit. We call them WW permits. And that's a required permit through the state. If you change your water supply, you need to permit that change. When you're changing to a municipal connection, it's a fairly simple application to fill out, but you still need an engineer or a certified site technician to do it. And they would have to create a plan to submit with that permit application. So there is that permit application, and that's going to change based on which scenario you are. So a single family home is going to be fairly simple. A commercial business with a sprinkler is going to be a little more complicated because now you're changing the sprinkler connection. And the housing developments that have public water systems already are even more complicated because they have to modify their existing permits for the public water supply, and potentially disconnect some things. So these are construction costs. The engineering and permitting costs are very, very much variable, so we did not include them here. There's also potential for a connection fee. So anybody who's connected to North Branch knows that there's a connection fee for that. Water systems can also charge a connection fee. Some do, some don't. It is entirely up to the water system as to whether or not there is a fee for connection and what that fee is. So that again is very variable. It's not included in these numbers here, but that gives an idea of what a connection cost could look like for some different scenarios. So moving forward, if the town decides to proceed and continue down this path of a municipal water system, the next steps that we would be recommending are really focused on the sources. Without the sources, we can't design a water system. We need to know where the sources are going to be and what they are, and what the yield is. So we've talked a lot in the past couple meetings about the existing wells that were identified in the 2010 study as candidate wells. There's 15 of them, and so one of the priority tasks would be to verify the yield of those wells. So they're all bedrock wells, and bedrock wells do have the tendency to decrease in yield over time. And so what they were permitted for 20, 30 years ago may not be what they're putting out today. So we would want to verify what those wells are putting out. Also, what they were permitted for when they were initially constructed may have accounted for interference from other nearby wells. So we would also include in this monitoring other nearby wells to look at the interference between the candidate well and other wells. And if we could replace the other wells with a municipal water system, we eliminate that interference, and therefore we could increase the yield of that well. So those are some things to look at for the existing wells. I think I mentioned last time, I don't believe the town has any intent of forcing any owners of these public water supplies to comply with this. It would be voluntary, and the town would ask permission, obtain permission first before doing any sort of testing on privately owned wells. Another recommendation is some targeted PFAS sampling. We know that there's some PFAS. It's shown up in some of the wells in town. There's projects ongoing currently to develop treatment for those systems that have it. Actually, one of them's right here. And so public water supplies, public community water supplies, so the ones that are serving generally housing developments, are required to test for PFAS. But private wells aren't required to. Transient non-community wells, so the one that serves a restaurant or a hotel, they're not required to test for PFAS. So there's a whole bunch of wells in Dover. We know there's a lot of wells in Dover. And so if we have PFAS in some of them, it is likely we have PFAS in others that we don't know about. So one of the recommendations would be to do some targeted PFAS sampling in the areas where we know that there's PFAS in some wells, and try to determine the extent of that potential contamination. And that could guide where we look for wells. We don't want to look for wells in those areas that are contaminated. And then the next one would be the gravel well option, looking for gravel well sites. So that would include some what's called windshield surveys, kind of driving around, checking out different sites, and some desktop analysis of the depth of gravel, and identifying areas that might be suitable for a high capacity gravel well. As we previously discussed, gravel wells tend to be more reliable over time. And then the last two there are just reaching out. They're reaching out to the large parcel property owners in some of these areas that we would be looking for wells, to see if anybody's interested in selling or providing an easement. Contacting the Green Mountain National Forest to see if there's any possibility of the town being able to develop a well in the National Forest lands. We discussed at the last meeting that National Forest lands had a lower potential for contamination. So those are the some of the recommendations, and we did have some cost estimates from the hydrogeologist on the yield verification on the existing wells. Doing all 15 of them, the estimated cost is ranged between $30,000 and $50,000 to verify the yields, including monitoring interference. And then the field verification of gravel areas, that one's usually a lower cost option or task, in the range of maybe $5,000 to $10,000 per site. And then if there are property owners identified that are willing to sell or provide an easement to the town, then it would be recommended to pursue those easements or purchase and sale agreements, proceed with some test drilling to start actually quantifying what the yield's going to be, what the water quality looks like. And excluding land acquisition costs, the estimated cost for well siting, doing the test drilling, is $20,000 to $30,000 per site. So that's for siting the well. So $20,000 to $30,000 for siting the well, and then $80,000 to $100,000 for actually drilling and testing and permitting a bedrock well. That does not include an access road. That would be site specific as to how long and where it would have to go. So those are just some numbers for kind of the initial source exploration type of work.
Sorry to interrupt, but where's the PFAS cost?
So that would be per per test. And I don't have a cost off the top of my head for PFAS testing. I want to say it's probably around a couple $1,000 per test, or is it? Oh, is it? Okay. So let's say 1,000 for somebody to take a sample. So that's for each site. Well, that would be for not for the existing wells. It would be for the some targeted sampling around where we know it exists. So I don't have a number of wells. And so what happens next? So we're working on the draft report. That's going to be submitted shortly. And then the committee will review and provide us with any comments they might have. The intent is to try to get the final report submitted prior to town meeting. I think that's the plan.
Yep.
And then I think Patrick's going to do a little summary at town meeting. And then it's up to the town and the community to decide how to proceed. And I'll leave it to the committee as to what that process might look like and meetings that might be involved for that. But we're at the end of our study now, so you'll be seeing a report soon, and I'm sure that'll go up on the website.
Yep.
And this presentation will go on the website as well. So happy to answer any questions.
So first of all, just so once the report is finalized, it will go up on the website. We will let it be available for a while. It's not going to be a short report, and there's a lot of data and a lot of information. So we're going to give people enough chance to review. We haven't set a date yet, but I would say sometime this summer we'll have another opportunity after people have had a chance to review and digest and come up with their questions, and then we'll drag one or both of you back in for another meeting just to answer questions. So, okay, let's start with questions. For the record, just so for the recording, can you just state your name too?
Pat, I'm on Zoom. I have questions whenever you're ready for me.
Okay.
So,
Name?
build outs, that's what I'm talking about, other scenarios? Yes. So is that at the 2%? That's at the 2%.
That is correct. 2% for 30 years.
2%. That you're paying it's south of 1.6 million a year. I mean, our budget is 5 million. And our town budget is 5 million.
This is so.
I just want to, so our budget is 5 million. I'm just thinking the numbers are staggering. Like a $35 million bond is 58 million in 30 years. Now, if you do like a level bond, then you're going to pay interest in the principal. Not like Killen City, where they're kind of scrambling now because they're on the back of the first 5 years just the interest. But that's a 50. It's 31% of our budget would be paying to service the debt. I think the better graph would be put the debt service on a 30-year, $35 million bond as it correlates to the town revenue and to the town budget to service that debt. And that's just one phase because you have 35, 24,
Can you say more words about putting the? So what this would end up being is, so you have the general fund of the town.
Yeah.
Is your $5 million roads, bridges, people, places, things. The water system would become what's called an enterprise fund or a business type activity. So it would be managed separate from the general fund. And so the financial picture of the enterprise fund sort of lives separate from the general fund.
in that scenario, then you should go with the revenue bond. Because if it's going to be a business than get a bond where the business pays for it, but it's not great for the lender or the bond buyer. That's risky because you have the protection of the general obligation bond, which is better for you. The institutional bond investor wants 5% of the premium. They want a general.
Well, so that's the beauty of going through the SRF is the bond isn't actually purchased by anybody. So the bond simply sits as
a big bond. Out there, it's probably a better investment. But the general, if you do a GO bond, I don't know if that's good for town.
So the GO, while yes, it would sit under the, like if you're looking at the audit, for example.
Yes.
And if the GO was, so it's too, now we're getting into really minutiae here. So if the GO, I'm going to assume the town is going to pass a GO. If the GO is used to underpin an SRF loan, the GO doesn't actually get sold to anybody. It just sort of sits. And so when an audit is done, the auditor will look at the SRF loan and it will assign it to the enterprise fund. Okay. If the GO is used to underpin a loan to the bond bank, that bond is sold essentially to the bond bank. And that is then shown as debt, yes, on the general fund. However, it is like I said, 99.9999999 infinity practice in Vermont for wastewater utilities to pass a GO, but the repayment of that GO is borne by the users of the system. That debt payment lives under the profit and loss statement of the
expenditures.
Yes, right, of the enterprise fund.
I just look at this and I'm a neophyte for this. So I see 35 million, I see 58 million because that's at 30 years.
Yeah.
I see 35 million. I see 58 million. I see 25 million. I think that's 48 million after,
right, because you add and so
the cost of today's money with inflation 30 years from now.
Well, so that's kind of the beauty. So that's the beauty of, for example, the SRF is that it's locked. It is level. It's like your mortgage.
At 2%.
At 2%.
But it's still.
So if this would be.
Yeah. So Keith, just from a format, it's not going to be a discussion. You have to ask a question, let her answer the question. Then we got to give other people a chance. And then we'll come back. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wrap it up. It's good, but I just want to give other people an opportunity. So, yeah. Yeah.
My bonding. I thought there was the charge with the issuance, where they take the issuance out. Just say you did 20 million, they would take out 1 to 2%, but you still pay the 20 million on the Vermont bond. Right?
So
like you pay for that dead money.
Dead money. I mean, it's not a water system. It's going into widgets. But the bond bank, the way the financing works with the bond bank, again, as a conduit financer, the bond bank is actually taking risk to the bond market. So they are the ones who are. And because the bond bank has such high ratings, they get a premium when they go to the bond market. So it actually costs less to borrow through the bond bank on the capital markets, and that's why the bond bank absorbs the cost of issuance and doesn't. So it is a 1-to-1. Whatever the bond bank gets as interest rates on that annual principal maturity, that it's a 1-to-1. Bond bank gets charged 4%, Dover's charged 4%. The bond bank does not do a premium, and it also doesn't do it doesn't charge more or less. And if the bond bank refunds in a specific year, they pass the savings on to the borrower.
Okay. All right. Let's go on. Steve Montello, I think on the Zoom had a question.
Yep. Thanks, Pat. Yes. Thanks for everyone's hard work on this. Chrissy, I just want to go back to like your first or second slide where it denoted users as compared to ERUs, connections. There you go. Thank you. So the West Dover base area is 1,160 users. How many of those are single family versus condominiums? Do you know that?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I do have a breakdown in my spreadsheet, but I don't have it here.
I
Okay.
would bet that's largely condominiums, if that's the base area of the mountain.
Yeah, it's pretty easily a high percentage condos,
Right. That's my point. Yes.
Yeah.
well over half.
And second, Chrissy, I think at some point in the future, you should really take a look at the operating expenses. I'm sure you have a good baseline for that. But I know for North Branch Fire District, we're spending, well into the $1.5 million to operate that. And I know it's a lot different, but just to hire an operator and a bookkeeper is going to cost $150,000 a year. So it just seems like it's a little off. That's Pat. That's all I had. Those were my general comments, Pat.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Tabby.
And very recently, within the past few weeks, Governor Scott announced an $8 billion infusion into the CHIP fund, which is designed for infrastructure, et cetera. How might we be able to take advantage of some of that money as part of this infrastructure bill, since that is being targeted specifically for projects like this?
Yeah, so I took a quick look at CHIP. It's the housing infrastructure program similar to TIP, which was the tax increment financing. So essentially what it's saying is that if a community, and I'm like oversimplifying it, if a community is going to develop housing, affordable housing, fill in the blank type of housing, and needs to upgrade its infrastructure to support said housing, then the community can, just like TIF, keep some percentage of the increase in revenue from property taxes as a result of the appreciated land value. Again, I'm oversimplifying this, and the amount of money that's being essentially put aside is like, okay, the state is gonna say, we're gonna let go $8 billion in additional tax revenue to allow this to happen. The window for doing this, I believe, is too small for the timeline we're talking about. And I think that's why I stopped sort of reading, is because I feel like it's like 5 years, 5 to 7 years, something like that. And so and it may get extended, right? Like, who knows what happens? But I think the timing of the CHIP program, that's redundant, of CHIP is not consistent with the timeline of the first phase of this project.
Ashley, would it be fair to say, just for the benefit of, you've kind of given a snapshot of what's available for financing today.
Exactly.
We're looking at a timeline of 10 years plus or minus. All of that may change over the course of that 10 years. Yes.
And still,
Yeah.
tax increment financing.
Right.
There are administrative costs. It's like you start leveling these things on. To your point, sir, about the town's budget is $5 million. Well, you start adding on these special projects, and you start increasing the administrative burden of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Somebody over here.
Involved with look at the timeline and where the cutoff points are. It seemed like, for instance, you can do test drilling in 1B, if I remember correctly, roughly. And it seems that that's a key spot where you end up with potential failure. Let's say, for argument's sake, there are numbers of sites where people have used herbicides, pesticides, whatever else is getting in the water. And then you call that. What's our risk as a town? Versus us at that point?
I mean, certainly the town's been here before, right? Like, elephant in the room, this has happened before, where work happened and for whatever reason it stopped. And there was a loan, and the loan did have to get paid back. So I think certainly the clearest off ramp would be in-source exploration, because if you don't have enough, as Chrissy said in one of the last slides, like if we don't have enough water, then the scope of the project either fundamentally shrinks and is non-viable, or is just non-viable. And so yeah, that is a risk. Then if the community took on a planning loan, then that planning loan, whatever was dispersed, would get paid back over 5 years at 0%. Okay.
So just to add, I think from the town perspective, and I'll open this up to the other members of the task force, it's my understanding that when Chrissy's work is done and we go through whatever the next decision points will be, to figure out, do we go into the pathway of doing a preliminary engineering study? There may be some data that we collect before that or as part of that. And then after the preliminary engineering study, then there's the other engineering work that we've done. Each one of those kind of represents a gate where we could say, yeah, or say, hey, this is great. This is better than we thought. There's a range of possible solutions that we're going to there'll be decisions that'll be made by us as we go along. And that's the plan. So, Jim, you had a question. Yep.
Question. How many wells in Dover have exceeded the PFAS standards?
I think it is 4 or 5. I want to say 4.
And how many wells in town?
Probably over 1,000. But remember that a very small number, maybe 40 to 50 wells have been tested for PFAS.
Okay, just a point of clarification. The town obligation is about $5 million. Excuse me, 5 million. And that's spread around approximately 3,400 users. But this bond that was issued for, say, 35 million, around 1,160 people are going to pay for that bond. Is that how I understand what you said?
So let me make sure I understand you. So right now, Dover has an annual operating budget of $5 million that is spread over whatever your assessed value is of the town.
3,400 taxpayers.
But it's the assessed value.
It's
So
Yeah, it's value, it's property value. It's not evenly spread. Yeah.
Change.
Yeah.
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 I mean, we could debate that till the cows come home. But so then for the potential public water system, the cost to build said system could be 30 to, what was the high, 47,
45.
something like that.
Yeah.
Is then, but that's not an annual cost, right? That's the full build out, and the full build out, gosh, could be 20 years. So that full amount is not going to be realized at year 10. It's going to be realized over 10 plus years. And then the annual payment on those incremental phases would have a certain dollar value. And in Chrissy's scenario,
There's 2 million on the whole.
okay, so debt service on the base plus commercial, right? So if we went with the full build out, roughly an annual payment, and again, that 2 million wouldn't happen until like full build out. So
My question was, cost is being borne by 1,160 people.
It's being
Not
borne
how
by
it's spread.
it's being borne by 2,167 ERUs. And so when we're thinking about, so in terms of utilities, you think about it in terms of usage, not people,
So a
because
commercial user is different than a residential user,
exactly, a
right? That's,
commercial,
yeah.
and keep in mind that a lot of these ERUs are going to be the ski mount, ski resort that then build in their nightly rates to cover their budget. And then that's borne by all the people who come and visit Dover. So it's not that, so yes, ultimately somebody is going to be paying it, but it's going into the business's budget.
Okay,
I wanted to say something about
go ahead, Ken.
the 5 million budget. Because it's not unprecedented. The 5 million doesn't include everything. There are many other programs that the town undertakes that's not in the budget. I don't believe the 1% money is in there. So the
Nope.
town collects money
Nope.
on the 1% from all the inns and all the hotels, and they spend that money in the town. That's money that the town really is kind of in their budget, but it's not in the budget number of the 5 million. Another piece is that North Branch Fire District operates on $1.5 million budget. $1.5 million comes in, $1.5 million goes out. That's not in the 5 million. So when you talk about a $5 million budget in a town like this, you're oversimplifying it. The actual amount of money that this town spends is substantially higher than that. For instance, like I said, $1 million, whatever is on the 1%, $1.5 million for the fire district, and whatever else that off the top of my head, I don't even know.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say.
Yep.
Yeah, Jim,
Randy?
Jim, I want to answer this directly to you, not answer it, but just point out, we don't know at this point how the money will be allocated. In other words, she said that it may be a gallonage fee. It probably what it won't be is what you're trying to point to, which is $1 per dollar. Every household pays the same amount.
Paying equally for that same net cost is being borne by 1,160 people, where that number was presented.
Potentially, yes. I mean, we haven't really explored, and we haven't gone to the voters to decide how that's going to work.
I mean, I'd like to know who's paying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my question.
Sarah.
Okay,
Wait,
so
hold on, Jim. I'm gonna work around.
I
I'll
had a
let
couple
Sarah.
of questions. Jim,
Jim,
let me have my turn.
hold on, Jim. Yeah, I recognize Sarah. Can you just give her, we'll come back to you.
Couple questions. The issue of PFAS testing. We know that there are a certain number of wells that we found it in, but you've also found some that have below the standard level, but the PFAS is there. And the federal government has lowered consistently the level of PFAS that's permitted. So in theory, 5, 6, 7 of those large wells could become overly contaminated, not because the level changes, but because the federal government says the level's going lower. Is that right?
Yes, that is a possibility.
Okay. The other question I wanted to ask was, the ERUs, those numbers, are those based on existing businesses and residences, or is there a possibility, because one of the reasons we were talking about doing a water system is so we can develop more properties, right? So that we can have, particularly along the Route 100 corridor, that we can have more construction there. So does this ERU calculation take into account what potentially could be built, or is this current structure, current businesses and residences?
So this is what currently exists in terms of estimated ERUs. So there is the potential. There are vacant properties, and there are housing developments that aren't fully built out. So there is the potential for more. That could then be added to the system.
But that would be unfair for us to speculate on.
Right. I'm just saying, if we're going to start with the ERU count, we're starting from a base, not from a.
Correct. We wanted to start lower because that's more conservative.
Right. And then finally, you're talking about the connection costs. There's the construction of the system, and then there's the connection cost for the individual owners. Are there any currently any state, federal programs that would assist people with the cost of that connection?
No.
Okay.
I guess I should say, well, let me.
Currently not.
So and Chrissy mentioned this in the January meeting, is so under the DWSRF, the borrower can borrow to install and or replace service lines. And so it is a loan eligible expense. Whether the borrower, in this case Dover, would choose to include that is an entirely a local decision. But it would factor into then the annual capital payment. And then, I mean, gosh, we could spend a whole meeting talking about how user rates are established, right? And then how to then like recoup that investment. Is it fair that everybody pays for everybody's connect? Like, I mean, we get into equity issues and I'm not going to go down that line. So, so generally no, but in the SRF world, yes, service lines are an eligible expense.
Okay. Rich? Go ahead, Rich.
Jim, I like this chart, but if you remember when the North Branch started, you know, Patrick, I launched my book, which I got fast.
For the record.
They did go out towards, they went here because it was too small, maybe they go here. So, I mean, again, you know, and we did, Rick and Joe talked about, you know, 10 years not being here. I mean, to me, the golden shell is probably digging our graves before we see it digging any water. But I think it's cool looking forward. And one of the things that the North Branch did, if you all remember, when you used to get your bills, if you were within the district, even if you didn't hook up, you paid a portion of the bond issue. And then you also, but you never were responsible for any operating costs. The operating costs were always in the, you know, in the user fees. And maybe we ought to break this out to separate out and just look at the bond issue versus trying to figure an operating cost, because, you know, there's no way that I should pay in East Dover for operating costs if it only operates over there. But if I have the ability to hook up in the future, you know, then maybe I should pay some of the bond. And that's how the original bond, even people in Dover pay bond, even though we're probably never going to hook up to it. But it does also help treat the water that their septic may leach into the North Branch, and that's why it's a North Branch Fire District. Because they used to test the North Branch up on Weaver Road to see if it was contaminated, and it does. It does give you the ability, and again, like the school, when the school's outside the district, they had to change something. But when we had, you know, they were trying to expand the school for those 300 kids that never showed up. You know, we were able to extend the line out and get that where we probably couldn't have done that if we had to do an on-site septic system. So it does give some ability in the future to expand and help cut back on that bond issue, and also bringing more users to bring the cost down. So I think Jim's going in a good spot too, but it is really confusing, and maybe we could work that chart different.
Well, that's one of the things I mentioned was there's so many different variations on how the rates can be structured. There are towns that do have assessment fees. So water districts do it. I know one in particular does it if you're within 1,000 feet of a hydrant, because that benefits you in terms of your insurance and fire protection. I know, you know, one has a sewer assessment fee, similar, because it makes your property more valuable, that you don't have to put in a septic system. You can just connect to the municipal system. So there's a lot of instances of that, and there's so many different variations that it's hard to provide examples for every one of them. So,
but I was just thinking, we kept the bond for just construction of operating. And I know it's not a lot of money.
and I would say we did this in Londonderry on the wastewater project there, because the town, the grand list in town is paying for their bond. And then the users are paying for the O&M costs. So everybody in town in Londonderry is paying for the bond.
And that's not what's being proposed in these scenarios. scenario here is that those who are receiving the benefit of or who are connecting to the water system are paying the bond.
Right. Jim, you had a question?
Yeah. Certainly, with the first phase of this, the largest beneficiaries are probably the condo associations, maybe the Mount Snow base area. And that's the most bang for the buck there. But if I read the state revolving fund handout correctly, any condo association can apply for this money, although it costs a little more. Am I correct in my assumption?
So yes, the condos, okay, well, there's like a decision tree here, right? So, Mount Snow can apply to the DWSRF to make improvements to its water system. It does, the term for privates is 30-year, 2.75% interest. And so a slightly higher, but the Mount Snow, and I'm using the example of Outlook at Mount Snow, could not apply to the DWSRF to get a loan to then connect to the public water system, because the loan has to be provided to a public water system. And so the reason for Mount Snow to connect would to no longer be a public water system is, yeah. Okay, yeah, follow that, right? Is that what you, or are you like, no, Mount Snow should take on a loan to upgrade their system, to put in PFAS treatment or whatever?
Well, I wasn't particularly looking at Mount Snow, but I'm looking at the Timber Creeks and the Greensford of the world.
To do what?
To apply for these loans.
To do what?
Individually.
Okay, to do what?
Improve or remediate existing systems.
Yes, they can. Yeah, yeah. So
And would that not then wholesale building of the west side of Route 100?
Can I answer that?
Yes, you can, but I think, Jim, just to clarify, I think, well, Chrissy, you could probably say from a technical perspective, nothing you have up there involves replacing any of the in-ground water systems connecting to the pipes that are already there, right?
That is correct. And I
Yes.
think improving, let's say, Outlook or Timber Creek, improving those systems alone doesn't achieve the same thing that this achieves.
Sorry.
Improving Timber Creek or Outlook or any of the housing developments alone, just improving their own individual systems doesn't achieve the same thing that consolidated municipal system would achieve.
Yeah. So essentially, each silo, each condo association would then be sort of their own island in the Dover community. And while the public water systems, it's really only the public community water systems can apply to the DWSRF. That excludes all of the hotels, restaurants, businesses, homeowners that may also be experiencing contaminated water, declining yields, limitations on property development. So that's what, so even though there are a handful, and granted a big handful of public community water systems in Dover who, yes, can independently access the DWSRF to silo their improvements, that doesn't achieve the goal of a Dover water system with fire protection and public health protection and getting development happening.
You're not addressing, right, you're not really creating either the benefits nor are you actually potentially addressing the quality or availability questions.
And
that. Sorry.
Associations kind of have to have this, essentially have their project costs, their engineering costs, their capital payments, their O&M in their silos.
The condos have clean water.
Yeah.
But let's not forget why we're here as a group. And it's because the Town Planning Commission in their revised town plan saw the need to explore a unified water system for the community. That's why we're here. The select board also agreed that that need was worth looking at. That's why we're here. We're not here to continue a fractured system. And Ashley just pointed out made great points about why that doesn't really work in the long run. So that's why we're here. What everybody does with this information is to be determined. But the reason we're here having this discussion tonight, and it's been a great discussion, is because there was enough vision in the town to say, hey, we got to look at this again. We probably blew it 15 years ago. Rich would probably agree. We should have stayed with it then. But we're back. And I think, Chrissy, I don't know if it was you or Ashley, one of our meetings said, Killington process was 25 years in the making to get to where they actually started laying pipe 2 years ago. So we are in the middle of this process. Where do we end up?
We're at the beginning of this process.
Well, true. Well, it
was no. I want to give Rich. I'm sorry. You know what? You had actually asked a question a while back, and I'm sorry.
Eastover. So it was a section of Eastover. It was a red section.
Yes. Yeah. That one. Yes.
Where?
Yeah.
Yes.
This bad section. What? There was a red one right there.
That one.
Yeah. Service areas.
So we can do the same analysis in the report I was focusing tonight on Westover.
Right.
Those are kind of the bigger. This is so when we do this analysis for the Eastover area, the costs per ERU are going to be significantly higher because there's so few ERUs. So we'll do the same thing in the report, and we'll have all of this information will be in the report. But it seems like as a first stepping off point, and I might be wrong, but it seems to me, just based on the survey results, and from what I've heard throughout this whole process, that there's a little bit more support, or maybe a lot more support, for Westover than Eastover.
Wow.
But we'll certainly include all of this in the report. We've done all the work.
There's a station right now not to use. And
Yeah.
it's been there. Now, this building is a beautiful building. It's used for many different functions, but you have to bring your own water when you go.
Yeah.
That doesn't make
All right. Can I, Vic? Yep.
Yes. I was just going to say that.
state plan for mitigation of potentially PFAS contaminated dirt.
Dirt.
Yes.
For the dirt. For the dirt. Yeah.
Same. So well, please.
let's just stick a hose in.
All right. I want to come back. Rich, you had said, are you all good? Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions? I'm trying to be mindful. It's almost 8:00, and it's been a really good discussion, but I want to make sure anybody who's got any questions has a chance. Is there anyone online who had a question before we? Okay, I don't see that.
Second.
Hello?
So moved. We adjourn at 7:53. Thank you all.
Hello?
This was a great discussion.
Can anybody hear me?
Try to keep it simple too. Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry, what?
Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Okay. Shh. Hey, everyone, can I ask, we had someone who was online who did have a question. So, and was trying to get through, and we did not hear them. So who is it that had the question?
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to wait to make sure that everybody else had a chance to speak
Hey, guys,
first.
gentlemen, please. Go ahead.
Mr. LaGrange, my name's Ryan Pacheco. I am a reporter from the Brattleboro Reformer. You and I spoke last meeting on a similar subject. Christina and we also spoke. I'm not sure if you remember me, but I'm the reporter from the Brattleboro Reformer who was here last.
Yeah,
I think so. Pause. So Ryan, we've adjourned the meeting because do you have a question that you just need to? You have a question, a follow-up question for either Chrissy or me?
It's actually for you, Christy, and Ashley, but I wanted to wait till this was all
Okay.
done. But
Okay, the meeting's adjourned, but we're happy to have a discussion with you. We can answer your questions.
yeah, I just I wanted to let you guys know that I'm here. I'm covering this as well, and I would like to be able to reach out to all three of you and schedule time so I could follow up with you guys via phone
Sure.
calls. Can I provide you guys with my email address so we can all?
Sure. Just do me a favor. You have somebody's email address. Just send me an email at selectbd03@doververmont.com, and then I'll pass along your email to contact for Ashley and Kristen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you.